On this episode of Still Loading, no more you crazy son of a bitch. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, we are diving into Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. We're diving back into the lore of Kingdom Hearts and the world of Kingdom Hearts. It's been quite some time since I've done an episode on Kingdom Hearts, and with me today to break down all of the insanity that is Birth by Sleep is Eric from the Unlockables Podcast. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Josh. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I've been a longtime fan of the show ever since I started my podcasting journey. So to be on, it's really a bucket list item for me. So I really appreciate you having me on to talk about one of my, for better or worse, favorite game series of all time. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to insult you for a second. You need to get a better bucket if this is on your bucket list, my friend. Okay,
there are many things in the bucket.
There's a lot of other bars you can like. This is a low bar to get to jump to not even jump. You could walk over this bar.
I disagree. I think it's
aim higher.
I disagree. I think it's a very high bar, and I'm very honored to be here.
I bad at taking compliments. Anyway,
just be mean to me.
Well, thank you. No, I can't do that either. I'm bad at being mean to people.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a catch-22 of stuff.
Awkward cringe.
I can't think of the terms of awkward cringe. Yeah, we'll go with that. All right. But no, I have you on because, actually first, we're talking Birth by Sleep because it's one of the 3 Kingdom Hearts games I've actually beaten. I've beaten 1, 2, and this one. Mm-hmm. I've started 358 over 2. I own pretty much all of the other ones. I own Recoded. Mm-hmm. I own Dream Drop Distance. I own 3. I own the 2.8, the Prelude thing or whatever that was supposed to be for. I feel like I'm missing. Oh, I own Chain of Memories, both as the PS2 version and the GBA version. Mm-hmm. I hate Chain of Memories. I'm not ever going to do an episode on it because I can't stand. If I did, it would be as in like a lore overview type of thing because it's all that game is good for is lore. I don't know about you. What is your opinion on card games as a video game?
Well, on my show, I've expressed very often my hatred for card games and video games. It's just something that's unnecessary. Tetramaster, Final Fantasy IX.
See, I actually I think Tetramaster is just a bad card game. Personally, I think Final Fantasy VIII's Triple Triad is a lot better. But
I would agree.
I don't mind card games when they're bonus optional things, or if they make you do it, it's not hard to complete the card games portion of the storyline. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't like card games that are just. I don't like video games that are just card games, like Hearthstone. Waste of time. No, thank you. I find very little enjoyment of that. It just feels like I'm good. I know that might be controversial to some people. A lot like Slay the Spire is very popular. What else am I trying to think of? I don't know, but I could not get into it, and it's one of the many reasons I couldn't get into Chain of Memories because it's like I don't want my moveset dictated by random. I want to be able to control my moveset. Like I don't like the idea of like having to like stack the deck of cards and change the deck of cards in the hopes that you're going to get the cards you want in the right order that you want. That's not fun, especially if it's a card game. That's one thing. When the whole game mechanic is based around can you do an attack when it's like an action-oriented game that turns into a card game, I just don't think it works. It makes me mad. It makes me mad, Eric.
Yeah. No, I understand. And out of all the titles, Chain of Memories for sure is probably the most unique in that aspect because that concept, well, I would argue that certain elements are kind of brought forward into this game with like the command and the deck building in that regards. It's not an outright deck building game. And yeah, for better or for worse, that was the decision they decided to go through in Chain of Memories. I'm not quite sure why, but yeah, that game, while being notoriously kind of annoying, is also extremely easy to break. There are certain combinations of cards that you can set up that will just wreck the game and just enable you to just fly right through it. And pretty much if you have 0 cards, if you just front load not to get off into too crazy of a deep dive here, this is what you get for bringing me
fine.
on.
It's more of a deep dive than I would have ever given the game, so please continue.
Yeah, pretty much. If you do go into this game, unfortunately, if you play Riku's story, he plays with a set deck, so it's a little bit more difficult to customize. But if you play on Sora, I found a strategy of loading the front of my deck with 0 cards, because 0 cards are the most unique in Chain of Memories. So 0 cards can be beaten by any card, but they can also beat any card. So if your opponent throws out like a card combination that's getting ready to just unleash a super attack on you, you can just throw out a 0 and just completely block them. And that was pretty much my strategy, was just to, anytime someone's going to do something crazy, throw out a 0, block them, and then just get a few hits in. And then that's how I just walk through the game. So, yeah, that's my initial easy beginner guide to Chain of Memories, if anyone's interested in picking it up. I would recommend probably playing the PS2 version over the GBA version, because it's just a little probably easier with a regular controller and more buttons. But that's just me. Mm-hmm. So.
I actually really like the pixel art on the GBA version. I think
do too.
The pixel art they did for Sora and Donald and Goofy is really good.
I do like the art style for that whole game.
I would kind of like to see another pixel art version of Kingdom Hearts, but I digress. I invited you on because you are one of the biggest Kingdom Hearts fans that I know, one of the foremost experts in the field, but also you have started on your show, The Unlockables, a series on Kingdom Hearts lore called Guiding Keys. And I listened to the first episode, the primer, which by the way was very good. That was that was a smart way to handle it, just kind of going over all the litany of increasingly bizarre sounding terms that Tetsuya Nomura decided to put into this universe, and including trying to explain to the best of your ability the extremely confusing logic that he applies to the series. So first, I kind of want to ask you, what is your history with Birth by Sleep? Did you first play it on the PSP? How did you first play it? And was it your first Kingdom Hearts game, or was it something that you played after you got into the series?
Yeah, no, so I've pretty much played, it was not my first Kingdom Hearts game, and I did first play it on the original PSP, which we'll get to that in just a second, but I've pretty much been a fan and been playing the series since it came out in 2002, I believe it was, because yes, this is the 20th anniversary year, and I remember very clearly getting it for Christmas along with a PlayStation 2, and that kind of started my journey with the series. It wasn't really until I played it and I beat it and I kind of put it down and put it away and didn't really think about it anymore. It wasn't really until I saw on the shelf in Best Buy one day Kingdom Hearts 2 had come out, and I was like, oh, I played the first one, it was fun, let me pick it up. And it was really during Kingdom Hearts 2 that things kind of like, I was like, all right, I love this game, I love this series. And it really kind of started my whole lifelong just love of these games and these characters and everything they represent. So yeah, naturally when Birth by Sleep, and actually Birth by Sleep was announced alongside 358 over 2 days and Coded originally, when those were announced, I was very excited, and I'm like, yeah, I have to play these because I'm into the series now. And Birth by Sleep was really the catalyst of me taking, I remember very clearly, my lawn mowing money that I had saved up over summer to buy a PSP so I could play Birth by Sleep. So yeah, and from there I've kind of played every game as they've come out in the chronological order, and that's kind of the history. It's kind of been a love/borderline obsession ever since.
This series is such an interesting series because it's one I probably have mentioned it in my Kingdom Hearts 2 episode with my friend Driana. I probably mentioned it in my episode with my friend Sarah when I did the first game out. Man, that episode's so old now. But this is the one of the few game series I can think of where every game is essential in some way, shape, or form. Like, right. You need, and in all honesty, that's kind of bad design by Nomura, but it's great design for businesses because it forces everyone who's a fan of the series, like, oh, guess I gotta buy this obscure console. What is the next Kingdom Hearts going to be on the Gizmondo? I guess I'm over on that one too. that dead old thing. But
Right.
it's always very interesting, like what. Like, just why, I don't know what goes into the decision making for this, but to kick this off, let's just kind of go over some bare bones info for it. The original release of Birth by Sleep, was January 9th, 2010 in Japan and September 7th, 2010 in North America. It made it over the PAL regions on September 7th, 2010, North America. September 10th, 2010 is the PAL regions. Interestingly enough, I see this really bizarre, and I I think this is one of the weirdest things. It was obviously developed by Square Enix, published by Square Enix, but in Australia, it was published by Ubisoft.
I'll be 100% honest. I did not know that. That's very strange.
I don't understand why. It seems very like, I feel like Square Enix is big enough that they didn't really need to do this, but
Right.
whatever. They did it.
That's very
It's
strange.
so goofy to me. Now I'm looking at the timeline here, and now I see like Melody of Memory is actually something that people have to play, but even though it's a rhythm game.
Yep.
That's stupid. That's what I'm saying. Like, they just add story into things that doesn't need story. Anyway, the game was developed by the Osaka team at Square Enix, and it was actually originally they went with that team because they were trying to find. They're trying to come up with another game in the Kingdom Hearts series. The Osaka team kind of came up to them and said, we'd be able to make a better game than any of the other teams. And so they whipped up a test version with Sora, Donald, and Goofy, and it was running smoothly on the PSP. And they actually used that as kind of inspiration to the rest of the team who was working on Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core at the time, because they were having issues with it. And when they saw what the Osaka team was able to do on the PSP, it helped them kind of push further their the Crisis Core. It helped push the Crisis Core team a bit further
Right.
than what it was originally. And I just want to double check. But you know what? Now I'm actually confused by that, because that must have had a really long release time, because this game came out in 2010. Crisis Core came out in 2007, so this game must have had a very long development cycle. And the where I got the info about because at the time they apparently just started development on Crisis Core, and that's when they showed them this demo. I find that really interesting because, like I said, Crisis Core came out in 2007. This game came out in 2010. So how long did this game stay in development? Like, that's just crazy. And I got this info from an interview with Nomura himself.
Right.
So this is this isn't like from Wikipedia. This is something straight from an interview that I literally have up in front of me, where Tetsuya Nomura said this. So it's very strange. But yeah, so the game was developed by the Osaka team. The title Birth by Sleep was picked by Nomura himself, and apparently the inspiration for it was that he just wanted the word "by" in the title.
Yep.
What?
There is no
my
understanding
God.
this man. You can try, but you will not.
His whole thing was like, there's not enough titles with the word "by" in it, so I wanted a game with the word "by" in it. So Birth by Sleep, which honestly, it makes no sense to me in terms of the story. Maybe you can understand it a little bit more than I can, but I like the name. It's like, it's very it's mysterious almost.
Yes.
It makes you wonder what the game is about. Like, it's a really good title.
Yes.
In all honesty. What are some fun facts you looked up? I don't want to take, in case I go too far into this, what are some fun facts you looked up about the development?
Right. So I touched on a lot of the same things you did where, so Birth by Sleep was developed using the same engine as Crisis Core and Dissident of Final Fantasy. And you're right, the timeline does seem to get a little bit fuzzy because at this time, it just seems like there was a lot of stuff going on at Square Enix. Like, not only were the three aforementioned Kingdom Hearts projects in development, they were also developing. So what they did for the earlier Kingdom Hearts releases after they released final mixes of these games. So Kingdom Hearts Final Mix 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix that had additional gameplay stuff, additional cutscenes, additional bosses that didn't see a release in the States until we got the HD collections on the PS3 and the PS4. So
Yeah.
this seems to, where the timeline is, this seems to have entered development around the same time, like before Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix came out, but they actually paused development on this to finish the aforementioned name RE Chain of Memories. So they were working on this, but they had to stop and put out Chain of Memories, and
that actually makes sense why it took so long. Then they started the development, switched over to Chain of Memories on the PS2, so that explains the long development cycle. There we go.
And it seems kind of once they resumed the development, it was then that was the decision to move the title onto the PSP, the PlayStation Portable, because Nomura had some multiplayer ideas that he wanted to take advantage of the PSP and its what's the word I'm looking for? Like its portability, essentially.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really interesting. Also, too, this originally, when they started development, like it was on the PlayStation 2, and Sora was intended to be the protagonist of whatever game they were going to put out. And it wasn't until later that this kind of, as we're going to go into the story and the gameplay, the kind of split tri-story 3 protagonist model came about, and we got the game that came out like it did. And yeah, like I said, the other thing, Nomura wanting the word "buy" in the title, like I don't know why. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Before this was in the works, when Kingdom Hearts 2 came out, Birth by Sleep did appear in the secret movie at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2. It was the last thing that's shown at the end of that movie. So whether or not that was always intended to be the title, or Nomura just saw it and was like, "Hey, I put that in that other thing. That sounds good."
I actually did read a little bit about that end cutscene that you're talking about in Kingdom Hearts 2. They knew beforehand that was going to be in Birth by Sleep, but they didn't know where it was going to be placed.
Right.
So, like, now in retrospect, we know that the cutscene at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2 is the end cutscene and cinematic for Birth by Sleep.
Right.
But at the time of development, they didn't know where that was going to fit in. That could have ended up being in the middle of the game. It could have ended up in the beginning, but it ended up just being the end of both of them, and for what it was. And you mentioned before they the whole linking up with wireless type of thing. The Osaka team actually came up with the idea of linking through wireless through the PSP,
right? And
that was the last thing they decided on for the Dimension Link system, which I didn't tinker with that much. Did you ever tinker with the Dimension Link system in the game?
No, not too much. I didn't have any other friends that owned PSPs that I could like do it with, so I never really
I thought you were going to stop it. I didn't have any friends.
It didn't. I mean, that too. There's a very strong possibility, but yeah, I didn't really have anybody that owned PSP or was into the series the way I was. So I never really got a chance to experience the online functions. Like you can obviously go in the area, and the game is called the Mirage Arena, and we'll touch on that obviously during gameplay. You can go there and do some of the stuff. Like there is a versus mode where you can fight other people, which to me is like blows my mind, because I'm like, I don't understand how that will work at all. And there's like a survival like horde style mode where you just fight. The enemies in this game are called the Unversed, which is another thing we'll touch on. And
yeah, it's very confusing. I forget why they're called the Unversed in this, but thank you to your series, because I'm sure you know it.
Sort of. I know it, but it doesn't mean I understand it. So,
I guess that's too.
Right. So that was really the motivation behind wanting to do that, is to add some kind of and at the time it makes sense, because during this time period of I guess we can say 2005 to 2010, like that's when online gaming really exploded and took off. So obviously, any game that comes out during that time is going to try to have something like that, and I guess they thought this was a good idea for this. And I'll never know if it worked good or not, because I never got to experience it. But obviously it didn't work that well, because they never brought it back. So,
well, and also that could have been just tied with the technology. Like the whole thing with the Dimension Link system is like, how easy is it to kind of it's kind of like what Nintendo did with like Pokemon. Like part of the joy of Pokemon is being able to trade with your friends and like taking the game with you and doing stuff with like, and being able to connect with friends like in person. So I wonder if that was kind of the intention. I know they probably could have done it online, but I don't, who knows? And also like that would have, because back in, 2010 is really when multiplayer was a big thing, but since they started development of it so early, I wonder if the early development kind of necessitated that it went with kind of the more primitive version of multiplayer, without online function. I have no idea. I'm just speculating
at this
point.
Yeah, it's very possible.
So let's dive into the story. This is the section that is probably going to take up the most amount of time on this episode. This story is fucking wild. It goes all over the place in the chronology of the Kingdom Hearts story. So if you look at the way Kingdom Hearts is supposed to go, you have this takes place before the original Kingdom Hearts. There's another game I've never heard of. Oh, okay, that's 2.8. I was going to say the Fragmentary Passage, but that's added in the 2.8 thing or whatever.
Yes.
The final chapter prologue. So there's that. And then in the original one, like there is one game sort of that takes place beforehand. That's Kingdom Hearts Chi or X, and that takes place before Birth by Sleep. Or is it pronounced key? I don't really know.
So it can be pronounced.
I think you
key,
talked about it. It's
key
pronounced key, right?
Yeah. And that game actually eventually got rebranded to Kingdom Hearts Union Cross is what it ended up being. And that was like a mobile online gacha style game that, yes, the events of that game take place even before Birth by Sleep. That's like, if you were to kind of split it up, that's Kingdom Hearts ancient history. It's the era that they call the Age of Fairy Tales, which was like where the original Kingdom Hearts was lost, but I won't go down that. But
yeah, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, if like really, I tell people, and Nomura said it best, is like that Birth by Sleep really is episode 0, and I tell people like Kingdom Hearts is pretty accessible up to Kingdom Hearts 2. Even the story in 2 isn't that bad. Birth by Sleep is really kind of the one where I say, okay, like this is where things start to not go off the rails, but Birth by Sleep is really the catalyst for the rest of the story moving forward. It's one of the most important games. So
yeah, so you take control. You can pick this game was interesting because we referenced it a bit earlier that you can choose between 3 different characters, Terra, Aqua, and Ventus. And Ventus looks a lot like a character you met in an earlier game, not in terms of the chronology of the story, but in terms of actual release of, in the real world. He looks a lot like Roxas, which you met in Kingdom Hearts 2 and 358/2, which actually, let me double check. When did 358/2 come out? 2009. So that even came out a year prior to Birth by Sleep. So we already had a couple years of knowing Roxas. And this game doesn't do a great job. It's really kind of like a half-assed way to describe it away. We'll get into that towards the end, but you have Terra, Aqua, and Ventus, and each one of them has their own storyline and has their own character motivations. And in all honesty, I watched a really cool video on YouTube, and I'll see if I can find it real quick just so I can shout out the guy who made the video, because he had a really interesting breakdown of like what all the different characters' motivations are and like why it was good. It was really interesting. And the main thing is with each character has a different motivation for what they're doing in this game. I mean, I guess that's good writing and they should have all different motivations, but the basic premise of this is that they're training to be Keyblade Masters. Am I correct? Like they're all training to be Keyblade Masters.
That is correct.
Ventus shows up kind of like out of the blue when the Master Xehanort brings him to the Destiny Islands after he brings him to the Land of Departure, where this like academy of Keyblade Masters is at, and that's where he meets Terra and Aqua. Terra and Aqua are clearly better Keyblade Masters than he is, and they kind of are rivals to each other. And that's pretty much where the game begins. It's kind of like the backdrop to like what comes up here. So, Eric, why don't you go into a little bit of like what's going on here? I feel like I'm gonna butcher trying to explain this. Like I understand conceptually what happens, but you might be better at explaining it since you've done more research recently than I have.
Right. So, the big kind of first choice you have in the game is you can play any of the 3 protagonists, Terra, Aqua, and Ventus, in any order. I think it is interesting to state that Nomura did say that the way he intended the game to be played was to play Terra's story first, then Ven's, then Aqua's, I believe. I believe he said that was the way. That's not the way I played it.
It was the way that he wrote it, but he said like he liked the idea of people being able to play in any order they wanted to, but his quote unquote intended way was just essentially though, like how he was in the order that he wrote the story when it was in the planning phase. And real quick, that video I was talking about is by a YouTuber named King K, and the title of the video is Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. Is pretty neat, actually. And it was very interesting because he talks about how each of these characters end up getting manipulated and they each lose something, and it's not surprising because they are kind of isolated from everybody. Like they live in the land of departure. They don't understand that people might not have their best interests in mind. They might or they might not give a crap at all. I thought that was interesting. I never really thought of it that way. So I thought that was a really cool way to kind of think about it. But anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so, and really, like you said, if you want to play it in the intended order that Nomura said, that's fine. I didn't. I played Ventus first, and then I played Terra and Aqua, and it didn't really affect... I've played it also the way that Nomura said to play it, too, and it doesn't really make a difference. I just think that I wanted to play Ventus first just because, he looked like Roxas. So I was like, I want to play like that guy and like figure out what's going on. And even though I don't really do a good job of explaining it, that was my motivation. So, and each of the different characters too, I guess I'm kind of crossing into gameplay here too, but they kind of all have their own. We don't have to be strict with it. If gameplay works its way into the conversation, then let's do it. So really when you're choosing a character too, you're also choosing a style of gameplay. Like Terra is very much more like strength based. His attacks are slower. Ventus is speed based. His attacks are much more agile and faster. And Aqua's whole thing is that she's very good at magic. So her style is more magic based play. So you really have... and that's kind of cool too, because at the beginning of every Kingdom Hearts game, it's really, you do have choices, whether it's choosing the sword to give up and giving up the shield, answering questions to determine like what time of day your journey starts and how difficult the game is for you. So to literally have the choices set up in this way where you can pick what character you want and that defines your playstyle, that's pretty cool. But you hit the nail on the head for the setup pretty much as it is that Master Xehanort shows up at the land of departure where Master Ericus resides. So Xehanort and Ericus are kind of like the two Keyblade masters of this so far established Keyblade order that we don't really know like what the rules are about. Are they trying to do like a Jedi thing? Like what are they trying to do here?
I always find it interesting because major spoilers, by the way, for this whole episode. If you don't want this game spoiled, then stop now. Just saying. I feel weird saying that because I don't want you to turn off this podcast, so please don't. But at the same time, if you don't want it spoiled, be careful. But no, like Xehanort is clear. Like he's very clearly like from his visual design, like the bad guy of this game. Like it's very obvious to the player also in the very beginning as well. But I found it interesting, Master Ericus, his name's actually an anagram for Square, like as in Square Enix or as in Square Soft, pre-Square, when they were just called Square, which I thought was kind of cool. They referenced back to their history just by naming this character.
Right.
But yeah, so Master Ericus is pretty much like the Jedi Master of this temple. If we're going to go
fun fact, if I could interject.
Yeah.
Master Xehanort's name is an anagram of no heart with an X in it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So pretty early on.
All right.
Pretty early on, that's just like, and that's a very Kingdom Hearts like trope too, is that the bad guys all have X's in their name because it's very symbolic. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism in these games. There's the letter X. There's the number 13. So, pretty much when you see somebody with an X in their name, it is an anagram of a name of something else. So that's something to watch out for if you decide to play through these games.
Xemnas, what would be Xemnas's anagram? Do you know?
Xemnas, that is Ansem from the first Kingdom Hearts.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it's with an X included in his name. Yes, because they are linked to the same person. So.
Oh my god, this is so
it begins.
Confusing. So I believe you find this out later, but you see originally Xehanort brings a comatose. According to Wikipedia, comatose, which I wish I could find a better description because I don't want to just read off Wikipedia. But
right.
Ventus is knocked the F out, and he brings him to Destiny Island after his heart is damaged, and it this it's so dumb.
So-
it's so
so
dumb.
it's
We're gonna get into how his heart gets repaired in a little bit. I don't want
Right.
to say. I feel like that's revealed at the end of the game. So I feel we should reveal it at the end of
Right.
the description as well.
It's also very tricky to tell the story of this one without, because the stories cross over at multiple points, and it's like, okay, at what point is like a reveal here a spoiler for like somebody else's story? So
I feel like you just kind of go through. I mean, we don't necessarily have to go through each world at a time.
Right.
But basically, what's cool about this game is that the three characters all start with the same storyline. So once you beat like almost like the prologue for the game, then
Right.
when you start a new game, you'll start at the like you can either go through the whole prologue as that character again, or it gives you the option just to skip right to.
I believe you play through the prologue as Ventus specifically. I think is who they give you control.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you can choose between Terra, Ventus, or Aqua. And so the reason why the quote unquote correct order, and once again, it doesn't matter which order you play in, but the reason why the quote unquote correct order is Terra, Terra, Ventus, then Aqua, is because basically in the story, Terra runs off first. He
Right.
departs the land of departure first, and then
Of course.
Ventus goes after him, and Aqua is tasked with making sure Terra doesn't do anything stupid while also trying to bring Ventus back to the land of departure. And the reason for it is that Xehanort has pretty much poisoned Terra's mind. He sowed the seeds of doubt. He's trying to turn him to the dark side. He's kind of sowed the seeds of doubt because Terra lost his duel to Aqua in terms of who's going to become the next Keyblade Master.
Right.
Aqua won, Terra lost. Terra was bitter about it, and so he kind of leaves trying to prove himself. If I'm remembering correctly, right?
Right. So the whole catalyst of the initial conflict is so Master Xehanort is in town. He's a kind of master. He's called a seeker. So he's a master
He's here for the evil convention.
Yes.
He's in town for the evil convention. No.
Exactly. And he's very clearly dressed and prepared for it 100%.
Oh my God, yeah.
And so he's what's called a seeker, and masters that are seekers travel the worlds in search of knowledge, essentially, not to get into the different classifications. But so he's in town at the land of departure with Ericus for the Mark of Mastery exam, which is where the students of the Keyblade take the exam and become masters. And while Ventus hasn't had as much training as Aqua and Terra, they both have, and they're both ready to take the test. So immediately, and man, talk about like the easiest like test of all of time to become like a master. Like it's you fight some glowing spheres of orbs of light, and then like they duel each other. It's like, what is this proving to anybody? It's not. So, but what essentially ends up happening is Master Xehanort interferes in the exam. And makes the sphere of light test much more dangerous and much more treacherous than he was. And somehow nobody like discovers that he's like pulling the strings on this. Don't know how. And then
Plot reasons, that's how.
And then yes, during the second half of the exam, Terra and Aqua have to battle each other because according to Ericus, who never mind, we'll touch on that in the voice acting. But he very wisely says that it's in the midst of conflict that truths are revealed. And during this conflict, it turns out that Terra is very determined to win this battle, and he exhibits traits of the power of darkness, one of the dual natures in the universe of Kingdom Hearts. And they both see this, and Master Xehanort even more so, and he thinks this is very interesting. So it is for that reason that Terra kind of gave into the darkness momentarily, that he fails the exam and Aqua passes. Mm-hmm. And after this happens, this is where Master Xehanort starts to puppet things. He pulls Terra aside and he says, I don't think the darkness is anything to fear. I think that you did great. You're a master in my eyes. And so he basically tells Terra, hey, like, help me look into some things. And he sends Terra off to do.
That's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very early on that we see that Master Xehanort is starting to kind of pull the strings towards whatever kind of goals and ambitions that he has. And this is the part where Ericus hears that Terra has left. He sends the newly appointed Master Aqua to kind of keep an eye on him and find out like what's going on. And this all coincides also with the appearance of the bad guys of the game called the Unversed. And it's at this time, too, that Ericus is like, yo, Master Xehanort's just gone. We have no idea what happened to him. The Inverse showed up, and Terra's also gone. So he kind of sends Aqua to be like, hey, find out what's going on. Like, because this is all very strange. And it's also at this time that a mysterious boy in a black helmet, who we know as Vanitas, he is apparently Master Xehanort's apprentice, kind of goads Ventus into being like, hey, your friend left. Like, are you just going to let him go out there and do whatever? And he kind of kicks Ventus out of the nest. So through the machinations of Master Xehanort, all of our main protagonists are now out amongst the worlds, kind of doing whatever it is they're doing. And behind it all is the mystery of Master Xehanort and what he is truly trying to accomplish here.
Interestingly enough, the Vanitas, Master Xehanort's apprentice, he is, in Latin, Vanitas is supposed to mean emptiness, which makes sense for his character later on.
It does.
Additionally, this extra makes sense for character. It looked a lot like Ventus's name, and in Japanese, it has the kanji for Sora in it. So he thought it was perfect. Mm-hmm. So in the kanji for you find out. We'll get into why that's perfect a little bit later on. This game is wild.
Yeah. It's also funny how their names, Terra, Aqua, and Ventus, very clearly coincide to sky, land, and sea. Sora, Riku, and Kairi also correspond to the characters from the original games, also correspond to sky, land, and sea as well. So...
Nomura loves the symbolism, man.
The connections thicken. Not to mention that Sora is also the name of Masahiro Sakurai's company as well. So,
yeah, did not know that. So
fact.
the overall, now that we kind of have like the groundwork laid for this story, the overall concept, according to Nomura, is there's no coincidence in fate. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much his overall concept, and it's basically just the idea of like everything is meant to be, like all of this stuff that's happening is meant to happen type of thing. Mm-hmm. And from here on out, all the characters will travel. They all travel to the same worlds. They all, maybe not in the same order, but they all travel to the same worlds. And what's kind of cool is that each of the worlds, based off the Disney movies, of course, has a 3-part story structure, and each character has a different part to play in order to complete the story for each of those worlds. So, a lot of times you'll start off with, say you start off with Terra and you go to the first world. I forget what his is. I believe his was I think his first world was like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, I want to say.
Possible, yes. I'm not sure the exact order.
Let me try Googling it real quick, and we'll see what we can find. But Birth by Sleep.
But you bring up a good point about the worlds, is that you do go to all the same worlds 3 times. You might think that sounds kind of repetitive, but they're not all exactly the same either. The different characters also too experience different parts of the worlds. So a part of the world that you experience in in Terra's story might not be the same as you experience in Ven's story. For example, the Enchanted Dominion, which is the world of Sleeping Beauty. If you go there as Aqua, she kind of gets to experience like the castle where the ball is and stuff like that. Whereas if you go there as Ventus, he's shrunk down in the walls of the nooks and the crannies of the house and is interacting with like the mouse there. And that's not Sleeping Beauty. I'm sorry, it's the Cinderella world. I got them mixed up, so I apologize. But so you experience different parts of the world depending on which character you visit with. So I think that's kind of cool, and it prevents them from becoming stale through your second and third playthrough.
Exactly. That's what when I was first playing through it, I was very nervous about it getting stale and boring because of that. It was just going to be the same thing over and over and over again. But each one, so for example, in Dwarf Woodlands, which is Snow White, the first character there is Terra, then it's Ventus, then it's Aqua. And a lot of the starting worlds are all like that. Enchanted Dominion is also Terra, then Ventus, then Aqua. But some of them, like some characters don't even go to all of them. For example, like the Badlands, it's Terra, Ventus, and Terra again. So it's stuff like that. But what's cool is that depending on the order that it is, you always hear like, oh, your friend, like someone else was just here just a little bit ago, and then they kind of go, oh shit, really? Well, they don't say that, but oh man, really? My friend was here. And it really builds this it really makes this timeline feel real. I think it's a really good, I think for all the things that Nomura does nuts with all of his story stuff, I really think this was really well executed, because it really makes you it makes this timeline and story kind of live and breathe, you know?
Mm-hmm. It makes you feel like things are happening while you're doing things, or you're just like, oh man, like I just missed this person being here, and it makes it feel like they're progressing in the story alongside you with whatever it is that you pick. And it seems to be, too, the way the story is structured as well, is that different characters are interacting with different characters in those worlds, and based on kind of Terra's journey he's taking with kind of his struggle and fight with the darkness, it seems that he's kind of interacting with a lot of like the more villainous and the characters that don't have the best of intentions in the world. Ventus is kind of interacting with some like more of like the more like goofy characters, and then Aqua as the master, she's interacting with more of like from Kingdom Hearts 1, the princesses of heart of some of those worlds. And then there's some worlds thrown in for just to kind of spice things up, like Deep Space, the Disney Town, which is kind of like the mini game hub. So you're not just getting the same interactions with all the characters, you're seeing different parts, and you'll see, oh, Terra interacted with such and such a villain and did this. And then when Aqua comes along, she'll hear, oh, like there was a man here with a Keyblade and he helped so-and-so do this. And she's like, well, why would he do that? And it just kind of adds to the continuing conflict, this kind of cat and mouse game that all these characters are just constantly missing each other, and they're not all getting the information that they need to get. And maybe there's just some misunderstanding here.
And they do meet up periodically throughout the game where all three of them are together, but it's usually for like these it's usually for like I think there's like a mid-game boss battle that they all kind of come together and fight. Now some of the worlds in this, some of the different lands that you could go to, you have Enchanted Dominion, which I believe, like you said, is Cinderella, Dwarf Woodlands, Snow White, Castle of Dreams. I don't know that one.
I think Castle of Dreams is Cinderella, and I think Enchanted Dominion is Sleeping Beauty. I think I flip-flopped.
The Mysterious Tower is another one. That one I can't. I wish they would just call it the name of the movie, but I also understand that'd be pretty lame for like a name.
Mysterious
of a world.
Tower is a completely made up world. It is where the wizard Yen Sid resides.
That's what it is.
That's in another amalgamation, because Yen Sid is a rearrangement of the word Disney.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
And he's supposed to be like the Fantasia wizard, but his story is he's like an ex Keyblade master that gave it up to like go do other things. Is what his deal is. So he's in there. He's and alongside paralleling this too is when you get to Enchant or the Mysterious Tower 2, that's when you run into Mickey Mouse, King Mickey, the king in the series. He's kind of training under Yen Sid, so his adventures as an apprentice Keyblade wielder are kind of happening alongside the three protagonists as well, and he plays a pretty significant role in the events of this game as well.
I love what they do with Mickey in these games, where he could have been the cheesiest character, but for some reason he just works. He really works as like this mysterious, like you don't know what he's doing. He kind of gives you a little bit of Batman vibes, because he's like he's a king, so he's super wealthy and well off, but then he goes to train to become a Keyblade warrior and stuff like that. I think that's really cool. But the other lands in here, you have the Badlands, which is Lion King. Radiant Garden, I believe, is another fictional one. I think that was made up for this game, if I remember correctly. Disney Town, obviously, I think that's like the old style, like black and white Disney look vibe to it. Am I right with that? Or is it
that's
just
Kingdom Hearts 2. This is just...
That's Kingdom Hearts 2.
I'm not sure. It's just a Disney-themed town. I'm not sure in my research if there was any point or purpose to it. And this is where we get introduced to Pete, and where you play mini games and stuff. I think
I just
really
looked up a picture of it. Yeah, it's just pretty much like, it looks like something out of like it's a fictional world, but it's kind of all based around the Disney aesthetic.
Yeah.
So it's not based off another movie. It's just based off like the aesthetic.
Yeah, and like all of the like all of your Disney characters are there, like your the cows and like Chip and Dale and like all those, like it's pretty much like the Disney town where like all these characters would reside.
Then you have Olympus Coliseum, which is Hercules. You have Deep Space, which is Lilo and Stitch. You have Neverland, which is Peter Pan. You have Destiny Islands, which is just from Kingdom Hearts 1. It's the starting point for Kingdom Hearts 1. And then the most badass name of all, the Keyblade Graveyard. One world that was meant to be included but ended up not. I don't know. I'm not sure why it was scrapped. There was going to be a Jungle Book level. And you can actually, if you look in the game code, you can actually like hack in a playable version of that code, but like there's not anything in there. It's just kind of got some assets and stuff like that. But that's kind of cool that they were like, I like that they kind of reach back for some of those older Disney properties that don't really get a lot of love anymore.
I wonder if there was a copyright issue with that, because I remember, so like Kingdom Hearts, in Kingdom Hearts 1, they had a Tarzan world.
No, yeah, I was thinking of Tarzan, and the Tarzan world has been scrapped because of legal rights issues with the Edgar Rice Burroughs.
And I don't know what the copyright is with the Jungle Book, if they like shared that or fully own that, or how that works. So I mean, I don't know if that's an issue. That's something
I believe Rudyard Kipling wrote the Jungle Book.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know about in terms of like, I don't know like what the licensing issues would be with that. Fun fact, my grandfather on my dad's side, we don't have it authenticated, but I'd be curious if we could. He has a book supposedly signed by Rudyard Kipling.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah, you should maybe look into getting that authenticated. That'd be super cool.
I'd be very curious about that. So yeah, Rudyard Kipling, I googled him. I decided to just look it up real quick. This has nothing to do with Kingdom Hearts, but he was born in Mumbai, India, but obviously during when the British Empire was colonized there. So, and he was born in 1865 and lived in 1936, and that's super random and not important for the rest of the game. But just Googled him, felt like saying it. So those are all the different worlds throughout the game that you can go to. Eric, are there any things that any worlds that you'd like to highlight, to talk about? Any ones that stick out to you, whether it's because of the plot or whether it's because you like the aesthetic or gameplay of it?
Yeah, so in terms of plot, and this is kind of always the way it's kind of been, the more Disney worlds I feel don't tend to add as much to the plot as like the non-Disney worlds do. Obviously because of the nature of it being a Disney Final Fantasy crossover, Disney has to have the representation in, and that's something that I've always kind of been on the fence about for how much I love this story. And I love Disney, don't get me wrong. I feel like the most important worlds, obviously Land of Departure, and that's very important. You don't spend much time there, but the most critical events of the story happen there.
It's also very visually interesting. Like, it's a really fun world to look at. And who doesn't love Disney? We love our corporate overlords.
Yeah, absolutely. I will not bad talk the mouse at all.
I have a question about worlds in general, but once you're done talking about what you're going to say, I just wanted to put it out there so I wouldn't forget before.
For sure. I think Radiant Garden is very important because we come to find out that Radiant Garden is the world as it was, if you remember from Kingdom Hearts 1, the world of Hollow Bastion. That is that world after it has kind of fallen to ruin and disrepair. So Radiant Garden is also very important because it is the one point in the story, like as you say, these characters are going through these worlds. One of the main points where they meet up is in the Radiant Garden, where they have like kind of a big epic boss fight with all of the main protagonists. And obviously you take control of whichever one you're playing, and then the other two are just kind of AI. And it's at that point where the trio finally gets to talk, and Ventus and Aqua finally get to challenge Terra and be like, hey, like, we've heard the things that are doing, what's going on here. And he kind of pulls away from them and says, I have to finish like doing what I'm doing and finish my work here. So Radiant Garden is also important. And then to me, like you said, the most badass one, the Keyblade Graveyard, aka before it's revealed that is the Keyblade Graveyard, it is called the Badlands because you visit there a few times with Ventus and with Terra, and that is where a lot of like the Master Xehanort exposition happens, is there. And obviously too, not spoilers, like the final conflict happens there as well. So those to me are like the most important. The Disney worlds are fine. They were chosen specifically to kind of enhance the story about the princesses of light a little more. Like, obviously, if you remember from Kingdom Hearts 1,
Yes.
Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White were all princesses of heart. So that was part of the reason why their worlds were chosen. So I kind of like diving into that aspect of that just a little bit more, and kind of seeing too, because of all the Disney villains across the series, Maleficent really towers above all of them as kind of like the de facto Disney villain in most of the Kingdom Hearts games. So to kind of see her in this as well, and kind of see where her journey starts, is also very cool in the Enchanted Dominion as well, and kind of see even she too as a Disney character is also tied in with Xehanort. So that's to me some of the most compelling worlds for sure.
Now, if I'm kind of blanking on this, she wasn't aware of all the stuff with the Unverse and everything. She kind of discovered it and trying to kind of realize like, oh, this could be something to use to my advantage, like a power, like a weapon to use to my advantage. And then she kind of got through in with the likes of Xehanort, right? Or is that something that she was always part of Xehanort's posse?
I believe in Xehanort's meddling and string pulling. He kind of happened across her and kind of told her about the princesses of heart. So that was why she was going after them in Kingdom Hearts 1, because it could unlock the door to power, is what he told her. Obviously, his manipulations were for his own end. Yes. But he did come to her and reveal that to her. And you don't get to see that, but she talks. She's like, oh, I talked to a person, whoever. I think she encounters Terra in that world. And she kind of says, oh, well, I had talked to an old man and he was like, oh, it's obviously you talked to Master Xehanort. And that kind of starts her path along. Yeah, she gets entangled with the Heartless and the princesses.
She kind of almost seems like parallel to like what the main villain is doing. Like she's there, but she almost like she has her own plans, and it doesn't really work out for her benefit. I was going to say what I was going to say about the Disney worlds. What are some of your least favorite, what are some worlds that you would never want to see in a Kingdom Hearts game now that Disney owns certain licenses? Like, for example, personally, I don't want to see Star Wars or Marvel. I don't think that fits with the vibe of Kingdom Hearts at all. I just don't. Even though I know they put Pirates of the Caribbean in, and it kind of worked. Right. And they did Tron, but Tron was already video gamey, so that that kind of works. It's kind of a de facto, like it has to. But I really don't. I feel like Marvel and Star Wars have too big of an existing universe. Right. To really, because like adding that in would just be chaos. Like at least with all the other Disney movies, like their universe is contained to their movie. Same with at the time of when Pirates of the Caribbean was out, it was contained to just those movies. Like those movies didn't have a huge universe. Now they kind of do, but it just, I don't know, it would feel weird to me. And that and the visual aesthetic of Star Wars and Marvel, I just don't think works with Kingdom Hearts. But those are mine. Do you have any ones that you just like that are under the Disney umbrella that you just would never want to see in a Kingdom Hearts game?
I would agree with Marvel. I just don't see how that would work. I think those IPs are too different. I could see how Star Wars would work. I think the parallels between like the light and dark side of the Force and the forces at work in Kingdom Hearts are similar, but you're right. I don't know how that would like fit in, and the aesthetics just so different that, I mean, I feel like one of those is inevitable just because the cash machine is too big. Yeah, we've already had some KH4 rumors where somebody thought they got a still from the trailer where it's the foot of an AT-AT walker from Star Wars.
No, so, don't do it, Nomura.
Yes, so I don't know, man. I don't know. As far as like anything under like the Disney umbrella, there's nothing really that I feel. I haven't really thought about what I wouldn't want, because by the time I got to Kingdom Hearts 3, I was so enveloped in like the story of Kingdom Hearts. It wasn't really like the worlds were cool to see, but the main narrative story is what kind of kept me going. So I didn't really think about, like, obviously I don't think anything like Up would work. Like that would be too weird. And I mean, like Inside
I feel like
Out,
Toy Story is one of the few Pixar ones that does work. I know that was in Kingdom Hearts 3, but I think Toy Story naturally fits like the whole aesthetic of it. Like it's,
I agree, 100%.
I think that one works really well. I could picture A Bug's Life too, or not like the second movie, but like A Bug's Life as well. I I could like Pixar. I think is the only Disney
Right.
that's not natively owned by Disney that would kind of work. Wreck-It Ralph, was that in the game? Is that in 3? Wreck-It Ralph.
I think he was a summon in 3. I don't think they did a full
Okay.
world, but
I
I think
didn't
he
play
was
3.
I want to say
own
he
3.
was a summon.
Actually, dude, I need to show you. I have a big Kingdom Hearts 3 poster up over there. I'll have
That's
to show
awesome.
it to you before we end the recording session.
For sure.
But anyway, yeah, I was just curious because like I'm always wondering like what people think about all the different worlds, and I genuinely like I like that they do so much with it. I like that they this world hopping mechanic. I have this bizarre love of the overly complex story of Kingdom Hearts because I really think because it's so overly complex, it makes the traveling to all of these different Disney like lands and Disney movies work in a weird sense. Like it really did a good job. Like especially the first game, dude. Like the first game is just, I think they put so much mystery into what Kingdom Hearts is and like what a heart of a world is, and I love Nomura's world building in that first game, and the rest of them are confusing as hell, including this one.
Right.
And this one, the characters, they all, as they kind of progress through each one of the worlds, Terra kind of keeps getting manipulated by Xehanort. Aqua is kind of they I know I said before they each all learn a lesson. Like Terra like pretty much learns like he can't trust everyone. Like the moment that he finds out that Xehanort has tricked him, he pretty much turns immediately and is like, what, I was doing this wrong the whole time.
Exactly.
Which I kind of like. Like I like the fact that he has darkness in his heart, but he also is still good. Like the core of him is still good, even though the darkness is the poor decisions he made, not who he is as a person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think there is a lesson to be learned. And like you said, all of that comes to a head too, especially Terra's trust issues, where if we're plowing forward with the story, obviously, once all the characters intersect and kind of go their own ways in Radiant Gardens, the manipulations of Master Xehanort become even more extreme. So it's at this point that both Ventus and Terra visit the Badlands at separate times. I believe Ventus gets there first, and he kind of learns the origin of his story, where Ventus was originally the apprentice of Master Xehanort, and what Master Xehanort had come to discover was Ventus possessed a heart of pure light, which is something that's not very common because most hearts contain both of those forces. And no, that's not true. I'm confused. So he had both, but he extracted the darkness from Ventus's heart so that
he had
a heart of pure
Ventus would become a heart of pure light and spoil. Oh, I guess this is all spoilers now. The darkness in his heart, so you have a heart of pure darkness, was Vanitas. You find out later on.
Exactly. And so we get to a point in the story after the gang all kind of meets up and parts ways in not the best of terms at Radiant Garden. And it is here that Ventus and Terra, well, Terra's been to the Badlands before, also known as the Keyblade Graveyard. They both visit here within moments of each other. Ventus first, and it is here that Master Xehanort kind of reveals to Ventus that Ventus was his original apprentice, and his intentions for Ventus was to extract the darkness from Ventus's heart, leaving him with a heart of pure light. And the dark part of his heart was formed into a being called Vanitas, the one at the land of departure that originally kind of coaxed him into this adventure to follow off after Terra. And it's kind of here that Master Xehanort's ambitions kind of come into the light here as what his goal is to do here. And what his goal is to make Ventus and Vanitas fight each other so they can form what is known as the Keyblade, not a Keyblade, but the Master Keyblade with the Greek letter X.
Well, the Keyblade as in CHI.
Yes,
like
as in the Greek letter key.
It's so stupid. It's so dumb. Like you already have like call it something else. Call it the X Blade. Call it something. Like it's an awful naming convention for something that's already confusing as it is. That's agree. Like the Xbox Series X and the Xbox One X.
It 100% is, and it's also a very stupid design looking weapon too, if you ask me as well. I think it's very dumb. But this is his intention, and he explains that the original Keyblade is the only thing that can call the original Kingdom Hearts, which was lost during a cataclysmic event called the Keyblade War. We kind of get this huge exposition dump, and Ventus is just shocked. He's in disbelief, and as Xehanort does is he tells him to go talk to your master Ericus and ask him if this is the truth, kind of sending him on a collision course with Ericus. And then what happens is, moments later, Terra kind of shows up, and Xehanort kind of feigns that like he was attacked, right? And so he's like acts all concerned. He's like, Terra, Ventus flew into a rage, and he's gonna go back home, and he's gonna harm Ericus, and like kind of sets both Ventus and Terra on a collision course with their master. And what ends up happening is, when Ventus arrives and confronts Master Ericus, Ericus makes a decision. He knows what Xehanort's trying to do. And there's a lot of history here. You might think, well, why wouldn't Xehanort just go and fight Ericus himself if he wants him out of the picture? And they have a lot of history, these two. They used to be friends, and there's a lot of like mobile game shit that explains this. I'm not going to go into it. But he's basically pitting his students against their master. And this is what happens. Terra arrives on the scene to see Ericus essentially getting ready to kill Ventus. And this is where Terra kind of snaps and just fully gives into the darkness and decides to take up arms against his master. And what he does is he wounds him. And upon his wounding, this is where Xehanort arrives and kills Ericus. And this is where everything kind of goes to shit, is right here. This is everything that Xehanort's been building up to is this moment right here. And Aqua's nowhere to be found. She's trying to just catch up and figure out what's going on. She's nowhere to be found. And by the time she arrives, it's too late. He's already plunged the world into darkness. He's destroyed the land of departure. Ericus is gone. And it's just, he basically tells them, you know, I'll be waiting for you at the Keyblade Graveyard when you're ready to come and find me. And basically sets the show for the final confrontation.
And this is also, in that YouTube video I mentioned before, the guy brought up a good point where one of the major like philosophies and lessons that Kingdom Hearts always teaches you is you don't turn your back on your friends. Mm-hmm. When you build a relationship with someone that you genuinely care about, you don't go against it. And when people do, bad things usually happen to them, i.e. Ericus makes a poor decision. I understand his decision. It's an interesting decision, but he makes a poor decision and goes against his students, goes against like people that he should care about instead of trying to find another way.
Right.
And he ends up getting killed because of it.
Right. And this is also an interesting point in the story where in the first couple of games, they kind of frame it as a very kind of black and white thing, right? Where the light is the good and the dark is the bad. And in this case, Master Ericus, who is very firmly devoted to the light side, decides to use this power to destroy one of his students. So it's at this point that we kind of see, hey, like these two forces aren't necessarily benevolent or malevolent. Like it's not mutually exclusive. And it's at this point that Terra decides, well, if Ericus is going to use the power of light to hurt his friend, he's going to use the power of dark to protect his friend. And
yes,
and that's kind of where the conflict comes to a head. And unfortunately, Terra played exactly into what Xehanort wanted and weakened him enough to where Xehanort could basically remove Ericus from challenging him because given their history and stuff, like Ericus is quite competent of standing up and stopping what Master Xehanort's trying to do here. And he basically manipulates his students to weaken him and remove him from the board.
And that's when Terra realizes his mistake. That's when Terra realizes that he saddled up with the wrong pony, or whatever that expression is.
Exactly.
And it goes to show, like, his character, he turns 180. He's like, well, I can't trust Xehanort now. Like,
right.
he burned the bridge. Like, it's done. And you do eventually make it to the Keyblade Graveyard. And if there's something that I miss in between here, feel free to jump back into it. But you find out that, Vanitas finally takes off his helmet. You finally see what's under, because the whole game, Vanitas, Ventus's dark side, which Ventus's pure dark version of himself, is always wearing a helmet. It's kind of got this badass looking armor. And he takes off his helmet, and it's Sora. It looks exactly like Sora. This is the part that's a little confusing, to say the least. So Xehanort. So at the beginning of this episode, I mentioned like Xehanort, like another heart saw Ventus's weak heart and decide to heal it. And that is, for all intents and purposes, Sora, if I'm correct. And so essentially, even though it makes no sense, Ventus, Sora, Roxas, all those, they're kind of like two hearts living in one body, or like two shells of hearts living in one body. And once again, like as you mentioned in your primer for your Unlockables series, a heart isn't like, it's kind of a very broadly defined concept in the Kingdom Hearts world. It's like it's a combination of a soul and a personality and like the morals of a person, and not necessarily just their, but it's also kind of their life essence. It also kind of not. I believe soul is more life essence, and then like heart is like their morality combined with it. It's a very strange, broad concept. But in Kingdom Hearts 1, when Sora gets turned into a heartless temporarily, the heart that one of the two hearts inside of him, the one that gets turned into a heartless, is essentially the Ventus heart. And that's why Roxas, if we remember correctly, Roxas is Sora's nobody. And if you don't know what a nobody is, I apologize. I figure if you got this far in, you should know. But when someone gets turned to a heartless, the shell that gets left behind is the nobody. Like, so it's almost like the demon heartless comes out, and then the shell that's left over is the nobody.
Right.
And Roxas is Sora's nobody, but it makes no sense why Roxas doesn't look anything like Sora when everybody else's nobody looks exactly like they used to be before they turned into a heartless. So this is Nomura's really bad way of explaining away why Roxas looks different than Sora. It's because Sora had two hearts inside of him all along. It was the Ventus heart and his own heart, because they kind of combined. Sora's heart was so kind, he sensed a weak heart and decided to help Ventus. And when Xehanort split the hearts from evil and light, you have Sora as like their version of Sora over on the evil side, and then Roxas / Ventus over on the good side.
Right.
I'm still confused by it. Did I explain that remotely capably?
You did. Yes, that was pretty much good. I don't really have a problem with anything that you said, but yes, this is the catalyst. This is why Ventus was comatose when he basically was dropped off where he was. And it's very heavily implied that the heart that Ventus encountered during this state, because when you start the game, I believe you start with like this the iconic Kingdom Hearts, where you're falling through the darkness, you land on the stained glass, which anytime that this happens, this is what's called a dive to a heart. So that is a literal representation, that stained glass of the person's heart, and it's broken. And basically what happens is, it's heavily implied, and I think confirmed in later games, that Sora's heart was on his way to his body because it was about to be born, and this is when he encountered the broken Ventus heart on the way, and he said, "Hey, like, you can stay with me, like I'll protect you, I'll look after you." So pretty much establishing like Sora's signature character, not flaw, but like what defines him is his just unbridled kindness and willing to help people, even before he was actually born into this world.
Even as a nascent Kingdom Hearts sperm.
Exactly. I don't want to think about Sora's parents fucking on your podcast. But
well, too bad. We made it here.
Right.
Now the audience is along with us for the ride. Right. No pun intended.
And this is what explains this, because actually one of the really key scenes that we did brush over is during their adventures, the three protagonists, they originally all come to Destiny Islands, and they encounter Sora and Riku when they're just children. Terra comes to the Destiny Islands and encounters Riku, and essentially passes on the power to him to be able to wield a Keyblade one day. That's a completely different thing that I don't want to get into, but and then what happens is later Aqua arrives, and she sees that she can tell that Terra already passed on the Keyblade to Riku, and it was who noticed how powerful Sora's heart was, and she was like, well, this one boy's already been given a Keyblade. She's like, no friendship should have two Keyblades in it. And so she decides to not give the Keyblade to Sora, who ends up getting it anyways because of his connection with Ventus, is basically how that works. So, and that is kind of how all that ties together, how this now ties into the main series, and now how Nomura has taken a story that is maybe not what it was intended to be in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 and very much made it that story. I mean, I think this game has a lot of fantastic story beats, but this was very much a game to try and fit whatever narrative he had come up with after Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 had been finished. And he came up with this idea, and it's like, now he's like, okay, this is basically going to define the game going forward. Because a lot of these ideas don't actually fit well with the narrative of the first 2 games if you kind of just play those and then play this one. So, I mean,
I kind of like the retrofitting, though, in a weird sense, just because I kind of like that each of the main characters here are all representative of the main characters from the original game. You know,
right.
like you said, Terra and Riku are very similar parallels. And then Aqua and Kairi, I don't know if they have any terms of character similarities, but I would say obviously Ventus and Sora have a lot of character similarities, just like the kind-hearted, good-natured, good-willed type of character trait. But like Aqua, at least I would assume, would be tied with Kairi. Kairi always feels like a weird character to me because they always like kind of, at least from my experience with the games I've played, they reference her a lot. You know, she's a major important character, but then she doesn't feel like it. Like she never actually feels like an important character. Like they constantly reference her as like, you know, it's this trio: Riku, Sora, and Kairi. And then there's like never any mention of Kairi, like barely at all in the games I played. Do you know if that ever gets corrected, or is that just something that's kind of an ongoing theme?
I don't think. I feel like personally, I think she has a great character arc in the first 2 games, but I don't really ever feel. I feel like after the first game, where the twist was revealed that she was the last princess of Heart, they never really like knew what to do with her after that, because after this, they kind of shoehorn her into this coming conflict with Xehanort in Kingdom Hearts 3, and she doesn't really play a majorly significant role in that game. And I mean, not to like elaborate on that too much, but it just feels like they never knew. Like I feel like by the time they got to 3, there were like so many characters they had to account for with the way this story ends specifically, that they just didn't have time to like fit her into the narrative properly and give her justice. And she may have gotten that, I don't know, because there's a DLC for Kingdom Hearts 3 that expands a little bit and kind of focuses on Riku and Kairi. So she might have gotten that might have gotten cleaned up in the DLC. And I think Melody of Memory is from her point of view as well. So, but again, that goes back to your thing. It's like, why should I have to play like a DLC in an additional game to like figure out where the hell she fits? So.
Every single thing is important in the Kingdom, and it makes me extra nervous because what Kingdom Hearts makes them a lot of money, and Square has already shown interest in like the NFT market. So, God help,
I'm afraid
anybody. Like, I hope they don't do that. I really hope they don't pull that trigger, because I don't go into a lot of serious topics on this show. You know, I'll comment on when I see religious parallels in games, but I don't really go into religion or politics or any controversial topics. This one isn't really that controversial of a topic or even that controversial of a stance, but I know people who will take it. I shouldn't say I know people, but there are people out there who will take it that way. But fuck NFTs.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
You don't gotta. I think among our group
it's
of
not,
people.
It's not a. Yeah. I don't make any big declarative statements often, but fuck NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
That is all. I agree. That is my PSA.
I follow a gentleman on Twitter who now we're gonna go off on this tangent, but that's totally fine. And fine. I follow a gentleman on Twitter by the name of Dan Eater. He is a developer on the upcoming WB Multiverses, and he's the head of the Final Fantasy IX Memoria project, which is like a fan made like Final Fantasy remake, where they're obviously not making the game, but they're remaking sections of the game in like 3D digital art. And he's a fantastic digital artist. And he did a really, really beautiful piece of Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, and somebody took it and made it an NFT and sold it, and there was like nothing he could do about it. Like a beautiful piece of artwork that he made custom art, and it's just gone. And he's just like, I don't know what happened. Like I saw what happened, but he was just basically like, it's so unregulated that there's like nothing he could do about it. So
I mean, realistically, the person doesn't own the copyright to that image. He can still sell like prints of it if he really wanted to. But it's the fact that someone made money off of his work is just so beyond fucked, and it's just
it's so stupid.
Here's I could, you know what? I have to do an episode. I have to do a bonus episode this Friday. Maybe my episode will be on like why NFTs in games specifically. And I'll go into why NFTs are bad in general, but like why NFTs in games specifically are just dumb.
Yeah.
The whole like just a real quick microcosm of a debate, not a debate, of my point. One of the big talking points that a lot of and unfortunately your boy Reggie has also talked about this a little bit. But he yeah, just when you do eventually interview him, just throw it down with him, be like, "What the fuck, man?" No, but say that that's your first line to Reggie, of course.
What the fuck, Reggie?
What the fuck, Reggie? NFTs, bro. But no, it's like the whole idea of like playing to earn. Like you spent 50 hours in this, you deserve to earn money for if you spent 600 hours in a game. It's like, one, you're missing the key point of what I enjoy about gaming, which is relaxation. When you add money into it, it becomes a job.
It's a job, yeah.
Two, this has already been done before. It's called the Diablo 3 auction house, and it was a fucking shit show.
I was just thinking that.
They turned it off because it ruined the game.
Right.
So it's like, this isn't like NFTs are not needed for what you want to do. So that's another strike against it. It already has been proven to be broken. That's the second strike against it. And just third, it's if games are supposed to be for leisure, then just get a job. If games aren't supposed to be for leisure, then just get a job. Become a professional player. That's how you do that then.
Right.
It's whatever. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So the end of this game, we're kind of go into the end of this, and we'll talk about a bit about some of the gameplay, and then we'll wrap it up from there. So, the end of this game, it's kind of a tragic ending for all three characters.
It is.
All three characters lose something. I believe, if I remember correctly, Ventus gets brought over to. Pretty much in the same area where Sora ends up waking up in Chain of Memories, at the end of Chain of Memories, if I remember. I could be completely misremembering that.
No, you are.
But
that's right.
No, so, I am misremembering it, or I am
no,
correct?
You're right. And,
I'm right. Okay.
Basically, what happens is all of the key players, right, converge on the Keyblade graveyard and Master Xehanort's plan is to still have Ventus fight Vanitas to form the real Keyblade, right? And basically, and this is where, if you've seen the secret movie of Kingdom Hearts 2, this is what plays out at the end of this game, right? It's a confrontation between the Wayfarer trio and Master Xehanort and Vanitas. And basically what happens is Terra pretty much goes to confront Master Xehanort, where Ventus and Aqua and King Mickey is there, kind of deal with Vanitas, and there's a third player there called Braig, who's basically a hired mercenary assassin type guy by Master Xehanort, and he plays a much bigger role, but I'm not going to get into him, but whatever. So
long story short, he ends up in Organization 13, if I'm thinking of the same character, right?
Yes.
Well, that's a story for a different game.
Longer story short, he is actually one of the most critical people in this series, fun fact, but we won't worry about that right now. Yes. So that takes a complete batshit turn. But so basically there's a confrontation, and it turns out that so Ventus and Vanitas initially clash, and Ventus actually defeats Vanitas, refuses their hearts, and I think this is where this just short circuits Ventus, and he just goes into a coma. He's not dead, but he's asleep. Whatever he does just to prevent and shatter the Keyblade from being formed completely short circuits him. He's not dead, but he's just in a coma and just asleep. He's out of the picture. And so basically, while this inner struggle and this takes place inside the metaphysical inner struggle between Ventus and Vanitas. Meanwhile, on the outside, King Mickey and Aqua have to fight Ventus with the fully formed actual Keyblade, because this is happening inside, and they end up defeating him. But what ends up happening is, and this is very tragic, Terra ultimately succumbs to Master Xehanort's plan. Xehanort has one thing working against him, and that is, unfortunately, Father Time. He's very old by the time this game comes around. So what his intention is when he sees Terra, the young, strong, powerful Terra, given to darkness, he basically stabs himself with the Keyblade and sends his heart into Terra's heart to like take over his body and like use that as his like new younger vessel, which is where the Nomura bullshit hearts can do whatever they want part comes into the game, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is what's left behind. You have one final climactic battle with the new younger Master Xehanort, which the fans call Terra Xehanort or Terranort, however you want to talk about it. But you confront him in your stolen body as like Terra's suit of armor, just called the Lingering Will, and you end up defeating him. And Terra kind of like tries to reclaim part of his body and stabs himself again, and they get flung off into the world. And the heart of Master Xehanort in the body of Terra now is kind of out of the picture, right? And this is where this all kinds of like falls apart. Like Ventus is in a coma. Aqua and Mickey are like, what do we do now? Like Terra's gone because his body's been possessed. So yeah, what they do is they take Ventus back to the land of departure, and she hides him there, and using Master Ericus's Keyblade, she like locks the land, and it turns whatever that castle was in the land of departure into Castle Oblivion from Chain of Memories. And that's where Ventus is hidden.
Okay.
Yes. So this is where it ties.
And then
in.
Organization 13 takes over Castle Oblivion.
Yes, because they know that something is there. And what ends up happening is if you collect all of the secret reports throughout the game, you can get like the true ending, which is where after that confrontation, Aqua goes to Radiant Garden to confront the younger new Master Xehanort in Terra's body. And after just one of the best fights ever in all of video games, in my opinion.
That's a tough fight if I remember correctly. It's tough,
but and this with the music and the emotion, like you know what's at stake. It's hard. Aqua eventually prevails, and Terra starts to slip into darkness. And what she does is she dives in and saves him, and instead herself slips into darkness and is lost to the darkness. So the state of our three heroes are: Ven is locked away in a coma that seems irreversible in a castle where no one can find him. Terra Xehanort now has amnesia and is lying on the floor and is discovered by Ansem the Wise, the ruler of Radiant Garden. And Aqua is just lost in the Dark Realm with no way out. And that's basically where this game ends.
It's such a morbid ending.
It is.
One of the reasons that secret ending was there, and it wasn't part of the mainline thing, it's something that you got extra, is because Nomura didn't want the game to end on a downer. I mean, technically it does. Technically, your main heroes end up with something negative happening to them. But if you don't do the secret ending, then as far as you know, Aqua just saved Ventus and she's off to do her own thing.
Right.
But you don't know what she's going to. But by playing the secret ending, you actually get the true ending of what Nomura wanted, which the only reason it's hidden, which I think I get why he did it, because he didn't want everyone to be depressed. But at the same time, like that's a major fucking plot point.
It is.
That is a major plot point that is never discussed. Or not, shouldn't say never, but that would be hidden away behind a really hard boss, behind a collectathon,
right?
Behind a collectathon and a boss that a lot of people probably didn't get. Like I know I didn't get through it. I just watched a recording of that after I beat the game, because once I saw that's what you need to do, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do this. I don't have time for this. Yeah. So I just found the video and watched it all. But
that scene is crucial because it comes to light that the Terra Xehanort amnesia person ends up studying under Ansem the Wise, along with several other future members of Organization 13.
Well, if I remember correctly, the Terranort dude, he ends up becoming the main villain of Kingdom Hearts 1? Is that the same person?
Yeah, so he performs what Ansem the Wise and his students are trying to do, who Terranort is now one of them, is they're performing experiments on the heart. And what his apprentices wanted to do, including Terranort, was like experiment with the darkness in a heart, and it's basically this that causes the heartless invasion of Kingdom Hearts 1. Is Terra Xehanort goes against Ansem the Wise's will and basically unleashes the heartless on all of the worlds, basically, and in the process loses his heart, becoming and for whatever reason, he takes the name of Ansem on from his master, who goes missing and goes on a revenge crusade in Kingdom Hearts 2, basically. This is crazy stuff.
It's insane. This story is insane.
But it is here where we get, okay, this is where the Ansem that is the enemy from Kingdom Hearts 1 and Xemnas, who's the enemy in Kingdom Hearts 2, are linked back to Terra Xehanort because they are his Heartless and Nobody, respectively. So that's how that all ties in.
All right. I think we should get off the story because this is going to just get more and more confusing as we go down this rabbit hole. To touch on the gameplay briefly, I really liked what they did with this game where they kind of had this cycle. It was called the command bar, and you could cycle through different commands. You could only choose, I think it was only 3 or 4 commands you could cycle through, right? I think it was only 3.
I think it depended because you were allowed to. They had a really interesting like command fusion system where you could start off with basic commands like Strike Raid or Fire or Cure or whatever, and then you were able to like find these throughout the world and buy them, and then you could fuse them into new things. So if like you combined like Strike Raid with Fire, it would be like a flaming Strike Raid. You'd throw like a flaming Keyblade instead. So there were a lot of different like combinations and elements of the command system that you could really use to customize your style of gameplay however you wanted. And it was this system too in particular that replaced the MP system that was in the first 2 Kingdom Hearts game and is pretty much synonymous with RPGs as a whole. So you didn't have MP to cast spells or do abilities. All your abilities were in your command deck and they were just on cooldown, and when they were cooled down you could use them again.
And I kind of love that. I kind of love that it wasn't dictated by it just made it a lot more accessible. I feel like it made the game a lot less. It opened you up to try new things because, like, in other games, if you had a super powerful spell and it was going to eat up a ton of your MP, then you're like, well, I'm not going to try that because if it sucks, then there goes all my MP for this
right, and I can't
battle.
Heal or something, right?
Exactly. But if you're playing through it on this and it's just got a crazy long cooldown, it's like, okay, well, that sucks, but I still can use all the others at will. Like, I just lose a command slot. And I think it really opens up the gameplay a lot. And that's the crux of the gameplay. You have your set of commands, and then you can cycle through them, and they all run on cooldown times. Now, in the interview I read with Nomura, he was saying that the command, the types of commands, it was kind of an inspiration from 2 different things. It was kind of taken from the Chain of Memories deck system, and they combined it with the charging system from The World Ends With You, which is just a fancy way of saying like you have a deck of options to choose from, and they have cooldowns. That's pretty much all it is. So I don't know why he had to be so specific. Like, oh, we got this inspiration from these 2 games we made before for something that literally has existed already before.
Right. It's very clear that they wanted.
It would have.
It's very clear that they wanted to have some kind of like deck-based system. Just look at Chain of Memories. That's what that game was. But I think this is a less intrusive way to do it for sure, because in Chain of Memories, every single action you take is linked to a card in your deck. In this game, you still have your regular attacks that you can just use and wail on people, but all your special abilities and spells are linked to a deck of commands. And I think that's definitely a better way to do it, and I think that they thought that too, because the command deck makes a return in pretty much every future Kingdom Hearts game from here. I know it featured heavily in Dream Drop Distance in relatively a similar manner, and then it made a return in Kingdom Hearts 2 or Kingdom Hearts 3 along with the form changes as well, in a little bit of an altered manner, but it was still, you can see that it was very much inspired by Birth by Sleep.
I don't really, in all honesty, the only other thing I have to comment about the gameplay is there was that board game that they added into this. Where
the command board, I'll be honest,
I couldn't very superfluous.
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you because I never did anything with it, honestly. I think I did like one thing with it, and I think it has something to do with like helping you level up commands and like getting new commands. I didn't waste time with it. I didn't really care enough. So I guess that makes me a bad Kingdom Hearts fan because I haven't experienced the game fully.
It makes you a human that doesn't want to wade through bullshit. That's what I say. The command board was one of Nomura's ideas, and this is so I'm going to read this excerpt from his interview. He goes, I've always loved board games. When I was little, my father would make dice games for me, and I would copy him and make my own. Because of that, I've always wanted to make a board game part of the gameplay system. In the Final Fantasy series, they have the Sphere Grid, which was a board game-like system for growth. But I wanted to take it even further and make a dice game that could be played by itself, and that's how I thought up the command board. And that's the origins of the command board.
I would argue the Sphere Grid is much better, but that's just me.
I mean, because the Sphere Grid is integral to the game. You don't need the command board.
Exactly.
I understand why devs add stuff in, like, mini games and stuff like that, but there's certain ones where when you place a lot of emphasis on it, like, you need something that places just the right amount of emphasis on it. You know what I mean? Like, where the player is aware of it, but it's not necessarily something that they're beaten over the head with. The command board kind of feels a little bit forced like that. I don't know why it feels. I guess it doesn't, because like you really don't have to do it. Now I think about it, I did play it for a little bit. I did try it out for a little while when I was playing it, but I don't know. It's been a minute since I've played that. Anyway, any final thoughts on the gameplay? Any other topics on this game that you want to talk about? I think we're at a good spot to wrap up.
Yeah, no, I think one thing I just would want to I'd feel terrible if I didn't at least mention it was the soundtrack in this game and a lot of the sound design as well, done by the wonderful Yoko Shimomura. I think that Kingdom Hearts has always been underrated as to how it's in the sound design and its music department. I think it's some of the most incredible music of its time, and I would put up its soundtracks constantly against any other like tracks in video games. It's really stunning. I mean, there's just so many fantastic titles, and one song in particular I have to mention is actually not even a song that most people will hear, because it is a secret hidden boss at the end of the game when you fight the mysterious figure who actually ties into the next game, but we won't spoil that. He has such a weird kind of like a fusion electro orchestrated piece, but never in a game that I've ever played before. And the song name of the song is Dark Impetus. Never before have I associated a song and a boss more closely than maybe like your One Winged Angels and stuff like that, because there's a violin section in that song that goes so hard, and that is one of the most difficult fights you will ever find in any of video gaming. That once you hear those violins kick in, you just like know you're fucked. Like you're just like, it's the violins of doom, and I know that any of the Kingdom Hearts players that have suffered that know when they hear the violins, they kind of suffer a little bit of PTSD. So it's phenomenal sound, phenomenal soundtrack. It's I love the music of this series so much. It invokes so much emotion in me anytime I hear it from any of the games. I would agree with you 100%, and specifically when you made your little trailer for the Guiding Keys series you're doing, I got emotional just by you putting in the Kingdom Hearts theme. The Hikari, the orchestrated version of Simple and Clean. Yeah, they really took a song, like a pop song, and really turned it into this emotional or like orchestral hit. Like it's amazing. It's really good. I'm with you 100%. Yoko Shimomura is great. She also did the soundtrack for Super Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo, which is really good. She's an amazing composer. And yeah, I mean, I got nothing else to say. So that was Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. We've been going for, we'll see how this is edited down. We had some technical issues, to say the least. So we'll see, but we should be about an hour and a half to an hour 40, I would say. So, Eric, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Thank you for picking up the slack where I let off for all the story stuff. I'm happy, like genuinely happy you understand so much of it, because I'm legitimately fascinated by it, but it's so hard to follow. Right. And I love that, and I hate that. It's all over the place. So, where can the good people find you online, and what would you like to promote? Yeah, so like Josh said, my name is Eric. I host the Unlockables podcast, which I bill as the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. And my show, I kind of just do what Josh does. I have people on just kind of talk about their memories of video games and just kind of about the content that they make. And that's been an incredibly rewarding journey so far. I've met some amazing people, Josh included, was awesome. One of my favorite episodes to date for sure. And you can find me anywhere that you listen to podcasts, all the standard podcatchers. And if it's not somewhere you want to listen to, just let me know. I'll put it up and you can listen to whatever you want, wherever you want. I'm on Twitter at The One True Sire. I'm also on Instagram where I do a lot of my promotions, Unlockables Pod, and Unlockables Pod also on Twitter. And then, I guess the main thing would be if you tune into the show, like Josh said, I am doing a complete kind of history breakdown of the story and history of Kingdom Hearts from the very first one all the way through to Melody of Memory, where the current one left off. That includes the mobile games, that includes every spinoff, every title.
That's so many.
Yeah, it's a lot, and we're going to go through them one at a time, and I'm going to attempt to, because like you said, the story of Kingdom Hearts is fascinating. Its biggest weakness for sure is that it tries to explain everything. And I'm going to attempt to explain everything so that people can just kind of enjoy the story if you don't necessarily want to play the games. And I understand that. But I think it's a story that
if you want to play the games and not focus on the story.
Exactly, right. But them by themselves are fantastic action RPGs, hands down. Mm-hmm. So I'll be doing that. And, of course, I'll be having other awesome people on interview in between because that series is going to take a while. I won't be able to put all that out once. I'm going to play each game and then kind of do just an in-depth breakdown and take notes while I play the game and do that kind of stuff. So that'll be coming, but those will be coming, every couple of months probably. And as
a little teaser, this episode will be out June 19th. So nice. Will there be another Guiding Keys episode out before then?
I don't think so. I would be willing I'd be willing to bet, and if I say it on here, it'll force me to finish it, right? So I want to say like end of July would be when I'd like to have the first one out because I want to put a lot of work into it. I want it to be something that's very, very high quality and very, very well organized. So probably going to be out sometime in July.
All right. As usual for me, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to support the show, you can do that in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use because that helps more people find the show and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy, which is always nice. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/StillLoadingPod. For just $1 a month, you will get the episodes a few days earlier at a higher bit rate, as well as access to a patron-exclusive Discord. And for $5 a month, you will get all of that plus 2 extra bonus episodes. So, are you raising your hand or are you just...
It was $5. 5 stars and $5. Okay. That's what I'm doing.
5 stars, $5.
I know people won't see the video, but I'm telling people to leave 5 stars and $5.
I don't know. Maybe I'll leave this in. I think that was kind of funny. Okay. And of course, the most important shout out, though, is the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to go support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that will do it for this episode of Still Loading. Eric, thank you so much once again. This was a lot of fun. I feel like we did a good overview of the game story and the game, because the gameplay itself, it's very simple. Would you agree? But it's very effective. I think the story is really what's the most convoluted thing. And I think we did a pretty good job as an overview. Obviously, we could have broken down world by world and what all the story events are that, but we're trying to keep this to an hour and 40 minutes to 2 hours, and that's just not possible with that level. Like you poor man, you if you're gonna have to break down the Kingdom Hearts story, like it might take 4 episodes just to get through Kingdom Hearts 1.
I expect most of those to be, I on my feed, you'll find episodes that are normally like an hour to maybe 2 hours. Most of those are probably going to be at least 3 hours. I'd be willing to bet and take multiple recording sessions. So it's going to be a good time. I'm very much looking forward to it.
It should be a good time. I'm looking forward to it as well. And that will do it for this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all for listening. Eric, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you, sir.
And I will see you all next time.